Okay. The next thing we want to look at is exchange rate. An exchange rate can be defined as the price of a nation's currency in terms of another currency. It's quite simple, isn't it? The price of a nation's currency um, in terms of another currency. We can also define it as the value of a country's currency measured in another currency. Take the Ghana cedi for example. What is the value of Ghana cedi in terms of Nigerian naira or measured in Nigerian naira? As at June 2014, the value of one Ghana cedi in Nigerian naira was 54 Nigerian naira. This means that with one Ghana cedi you can obtain 54 naira, or with 54 naira you can obtain one Ghana cedi. It carries the idea that hey, the cedi is stronger than the naira. So that is exchange rate. How the exchange rates are determined? How do we determine or how is a country's exchange rate determined? There are three approaches in determining exchange rate. We have the fixed approach, we have the floating approach, and we have the mixed or the hybrid approach. Let's look at the fixed approach. A fixed exchange rate regime is a mechanism for determining the exchange rate in which authorities in a country fix the rate against the value of another currency, a basket of other currencies, or to another measure of value such as gold. A fixed rate is usually used to maintain the stability of a country against the currency or value it is pegged to. So a fixed exchange rate regime is probably the central bank having in mind that maybe now 5.5 Ghana cedis is to $1. The central bank can decide that the cedi will not depreciate beyond 5.5. It will not go to 6 cedis, it will not go to 7 cedis. If the central bank is using such a policy, it is called a fixed exchange rate policy or fixed exchange rate regime. It keeps it fixed. Normally, it is very difficult to keep it fixed. It is very costly also for a country to keep the exchange rate fixed. The other type of regime is the flexible exchange rate regime. It is a mechanism for determining exchange rates in which demand for foreign currency and supply of foreign currencies are allowed to determine the rate. When you did demand and supply in microeconomics, you remember that to get the equilibrium income, according to the classicals, we leave the determination of the equilibrium to the forces of demand and supply or to the invisible hand. That is how the flexible exchange rate also works. So it is made to float. It's also sometimes called a floating exchange rate. It is made to float. As people demand more of foreign currencies, it causes the local currency to reduce in value or to depreciate, and vice versa. So it's also sometimes called a fluctuating exchange rate regime. And the last one is the hybrid or the mixed exchange rate regime or the managed float. This one is implementing both the fixed exchange rate and the flexible exchange rate together. So generally, exchange rates are determined by market forces. However, the government intervenes from time to time to stabilize the currency. When he realizes that the currency is depreciating too much or it's going bad, the government intervenes. So it is not that the government is just allowing the currency to float, but it is a managed float. That is what is sometimes called managed float regime. No government wants to leave exchange rates to be determined by the market alone, given the relevance of exchange rates. Because exchange rates are very, very important. If your currency depreciates so much, it affects goods and services you can even export, because the goods you are exporting becomes too cheap to the foreigners. If your currency appreciates also very well, it encourages exports, because if you export, people buy your product and it earns you more income. So no government is ready to leave the market alone to determine the relevance of the exchange rate. That is why Ghana does not use fixed exchange rate, does not use flexible exchange rate, but uses the hybrid exchange rate regime or the managed float exchange rate regime. Alright, so we want to look at international financial and economic institutions. We have a number of them. We have the World Trade Organization, we have the International Monetary Fund, we have the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, aka Central World Bank, and we have the Economic Community of West African States. There are some more, but we want to look at just these four. So we'll look at just their roles and functions, and that should be it. So the World Trade Organization. The following are the main functions of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization was formed to facilitate or liberalize trade between countries in the world, so that there wouldn't be a trade war, and trade will be liberalized. So one of the functions is they are supposed to supervise the implementation, administration, and operation of multilateral trade agreements. So they supervise that trade agreements are implemented, administered, and operated so that trade goes on smoothly among nations. Another also is to provide a forum or a platform for negotiations and settling disputes among its members regarding multilateral trade relations, so that always there will be trade facilitated and liberalized among nations. And also they are responsible for reviewing and propagating trade policies of member states, and to ensure the coherence and transparency of these trade policies through surveillance in global economic policy making. So they help to review and propagate trade policies that will ensure that there is trade and coherence, teamwork, there is synergy among all its members. And the fourth function is to provide assistance to developing countries. Developing countries, least developed countries, low income countries, most of them are in African countries. Normally when we try to export our products, they go to the world market and they command very low prices. So and sometimes also we don't even have enough funds to produce export products. So one function of the World Trade Organization is to assist these least developing countries in transition, to be able to adjust to the World Trade Organization's rules and disciplines through technical cooperation and training. So they can sometimes send experts, technical people to our country to assist us, to help us in our transition process, so that we can also go according to its rules and disciplines for the global world to experience welfare. The next is to conduct relevant economic research and regular assessments of the multilateral trade framework. So the relevance of research. Research makes us know the better ways of doing things. So they have a research department that engages in regular research and assessment of trade, to know whether trade is really helping the global world or not. They give recommendations after their research. And the last is they support greater coherence in global economic policy making for cooperating by cooperating as appropriate with the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and other relevant organizations. As we learned, trade is very good. Trade is very good. If you remember, when we talked about the absolute advantage and the comparative advantage, you realize that the combined production at the end, when people are made to specialize, the total production at the end is more than when countries are trying to be jack of all trade. So, but sometimes to facilitate trade, we need to borrow some funds from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and others. So the World Trade Organizations, the World Trade Organization, what sometimes it does, it's support greater coherence for us to have a good relationship with these international and multilateral financial institutions, to enable countries trade amongst themselves and for welfare to be improved. The next